guys, my name is Samantha Sorrentino, as you already know. I did my presentation on coral reefs, specifically shallow water reefs. Enjoy! So for my first slide, I have what are coral reefs and where are they from? So you can find coral reefs in warm, shallow water or cold, dark, and deep water. So shallow water reef or a deep sea coral. Again, I focused my research primarily on shallow water reefs. But both deep sea corals and shallow water reefs are from the phylum Cnidaria and the class Anthozoa. And there are also two different types of corals. So there are hard corals or there are soft corals. The hard corals can also be referred to as a stony coral. And that is because they have a rigid calcium carbonate skeleton on the outside, whereas the soft corals don't, and they're often referred to as kind of like fan reefs or fan corals, which I have pictures of that you'll see further down in the slides. But again, the stony corals or the hard corals, they're the ones who actually build the structure of the reef, whereas the soft corals are just present in the ecosystem. Corals are also relatives of jellyfish and anemones. They can range from the Western Atlantic Ocean to the Indo-Pacific Ocean, so they're pretty all over the place. They are considered the rainforests of the sea, and this is because there is a large part of the Earth's biodiversity located here, just as you would be talking about the Amazon rainforest or any of the rainforests, really. There are so many different species of animals and really just organisms, algae, stuff like that, that live in the ocean that rely on coral reefs. So they kind of are referred to as rainforests of the sea. Again, the hard corals are made up of calcium carbonate, so that's like their outer skeleton. And corals go through what's called symbiosis. So corals coexist with an algae called, and I'm sorry if I pronounce this wrong, but zooxanthellae. I really don't know how to say that word, but that's the algae that the corals coexist with. And that algae actually lives inside the corals. So how the symbiosis works is the corals actually provide a home for this algae, and what comes with a home comes with protection. And in response, the algae provide food, photosynthesis, to the corals. And that is actually what gives them their beautiful, vibrant colors as well. So when you're looking at a coral and you see their color, you really should also be thinking about the algae that live within them, because that's where they get their color from, which is pretty cool. For my second slide, I want to talk about benefits of coral reefs on an ecosystem, which there definitely are plenty benefits. So 25% of the ocean's fish depend on a healthy coral reef. That's a pretty hefty amount of the fish in the ocean, I would say. And these fish depend on a healthy coral reef for shelter, for food, for reproduction. So a lot of fish will actually lay their eggs here or raise their young here. If you've ever seen the movie Finding Nemo, which I'm sure everybody has, Nemo is actually being raised, or I guess his home in the beginning of the movie is a coral reef. So that's based on fact. Fish do lay their eggs in a coral reef, and they do raise their young here. My next fact that I want to say, it's not necessarily related to reefs directly, but it is related to the ocean, and it is related to a healthy ocean, which coral reefs need to survive. But 80% of the world's oxygen, or the oxygen that humans breathe, comes from oceans. 400 million people rely on coral reef fisheries for income and food. Yes, 400 million people rely on coral reef fisheries for income and food, so that's another big benefit. And I think I got the pronunciation right on the algae, zooxanthellae. I think that's the best it's going to get for me. But obviously those algae rely on corals to survive in the ocean because they live on and inside them. So they offer protection. Corals offer protection for these algae. So they obviously benefit. The algae and again, with symbiosis, they benefit each other. And then there is also just the beauty and the biodiversity that comes from reefs. Reefs also create sand for beaches, and corals can actually be used for medical purposes as well. They can scientists can get cancer treatment, arthritis, bacterial infections, heart disease, Alzheimer's, etc., stuff like that. So there are definitely a lot of benefits of coral reefs on an ecosystem, and just in general in the world, there's a ton of benefits that come from coral reefs. Now getting into, I was going to say the good stuff, but I guess technically the bad stuff. Climate change and threats to coral reefs. So, like anything in the world, there is a natural threat to reefs, and that is disease, predators, storms, stuff like that can naturally damage or I guess even kill a coral reef. But the main thing that is damaging coral reefs is climate change related, and it is caused by humans. So it's pollution, sedimentation, unsustainable fishing practices, and the big one, ocean acidification. So ocean acidification is actually caused by ocean temperatures rising and then CO2 levels rising, so the temperature is getting warmer, and then CO2 levels rise, and that causes coral bleaching. So in 2014 to 2017, just in 3 years, 70% of the world's coral reef ecosystems were affected by bleaching. 70% of the world's coral reef ecosystems. That is a huge percent just in 3 years from coral bleaching in general and ocean acidification. I mean, that's insane. And in Australia specifically, that's where the Great Barrier Reef is located. The Great Barrier Reef was actually hit particularly hard when hundreds of reefs were bleached down there. I think it was about 50% actually of the Great Barrier Reef that has been damaged by climate change and coral bleaching in general. Coral reefs can also be damaged by runoff from cities. And another big one, fishing boats. So boats tend to drag their nets when they're fishing or throw their anchors when they want to, stop to do whatever it is they do. And that can cause pretty bad damage to coral reefs also. I mean, just imagine if you throw a super heavy reef down into the ocean and it hits a coral reef. Their skeleton is only made of calcium carbonate, so that can definitely crack or break super easily. So those are a whole bunch of threats to coral reefs. And again, they're mainly caused by humans. I mean, I don't want to say that it's not common, but 9 out of 10 damage to a reef is caused by climate change. It's caused by human beings, and it's not caused by a natural threat. Something super, super, super important that I want to talk about is the nuclear bomb Castle Bravo. So Castle Bravo happened March 1st, 1954. It was a series of tests conducted by the military, and it was a nuclear bomb testing, and they decided, for whatever reason, I guess, to do it in Bikini Atoll, Pacific Ocean. They wanted to do it in the ocean. I mean, I guess they didn't want to do it on land and potentially hurt human beings, so they decided to do it in the ocean. But this nuclear bomb ended up destroying 90 feet underwater and 1.2 miles wide of the ocean. It completely obliterated ocean life, including the coral reefs. I mean, completely obliterated it. There was nothing left at all. And in 2008, scientists actually revisited the site to see if the radiation damage was still relevant. Now, 1954 to 2008, that's 50 years that scientists took to finally say, all right, now let's go back and kind of like assess the damage, see if things are regrowing, see what's going on. And scientists actually did find out that coral reefs were beginning to rebuild themselves. Now, again, this is 50 years later, and this is 50 years of that part of the that piece of the ocean not being touched by human beings. So there was no other damage that could have been, caused by humans. It was totally left alone. And this is something called GIA. And basically what that is it's the Earth's way of being able to rebuild itself. Again, these coral reefs were not touched after the nuclear bomb testing happened. They were left untouched for 50 years, but they were able to rebuild itself. And so scientists went down there and they found out that the reef is again rebuilding, which I think is something that's pretty cool. How much of the reefs have been destroyed and what is left? So, by the year 2023, which is 2 years from now, 60% of all coral reefs are actually expected to be highly or critically threatened. Meanwhile, 98% will or would have already been exposed to fatal conditions. That's almost 100% of coral reefs exposed to fatal conditions in just 2 years.
I know.
And in the last 30 years, half of the entire world's coral reefs have died already because of global climate change and human destruction. Greenhouse gas emissions are creating warmer conditions, and that's what's making the oceans more acidic and causing bleaching. So between the year 2016 and 2017, more than half of the Great Barrier Reefs actually have died in just 1 year, 2016 to 2017, because of bleaching and because of rising ocean temperatures. And I do want to say quickly that what happens with coral bleaching is that the bleaching kills the algae that coexist with the coral reefs through symbiosis, as I previously spoke of. And so again, this algae provides coral reefs with their vibrant colors that you see when you look at them, and the bleaching destroys the algae, and that is exactly why they become like a yellowish, dull, no more of a vibrant color. So this entire presentation, as you guys know, is about coral reefs, and you're probably asking yourselves, like, why do I care? What does it matter? But coral reefs actually have a lot of benefit, not just for, obviously, its marine ecosystem, but for human beings as well. So coral reefs actually offer coastlines protections from storm and erosions. They provide medicine, as I've said, cancer treatment, arthritis treatment, stuff like that. And they have cultural importance. And they actually have a very high net economic value. They bring in tens of billions of US dollars yearly and millions of dollars to local businesses because they are a tourist attraction. So if you're taking, a cruise ship to Cancun or someplace like that, what are you going to do? You're going to dive, you're going to fish, you're going to snorkel, you're going to do all that stuff. And that's centered around coral reefs. So they do bring in a lot of money. And basically that's why you really should be, be more careful with what you do and be, aware of what's going on with coral reefs, because even though you might not think about them every day, they do offer significance to your life. Can coral reefs rebuild themselves? And if not, what is being done to save them? So the good news is that coral reefs actually can rebuild themselves. This is called GIA, the ability for the Earth to rebuild itself. But they have to be left untouched, and this does happen over a significant amount of years. So bleaching conditions must first improve. Ocean acidification must first improve. We need to lighten up on the greenhouse gas emissions, as I've said already. If we do not do those things and coral reefs do not have the time to rebuild themselves, there is something called the nursery coral reefs. So basically scientists will grow coral reefs in a lab and then insert them into the ocean, which I do have a picture coming up, which you guys will see on the bottom right, my next slide. So yeah, they're grown in a lab, and then scientists or divers, I guess, will go into the ocean and they'll implant them or transplant them into the ocean where there is a damaged reef, and then they will rebuild that way. So in simpler terms, yes, coral reefs can and have rebuilt themselves. An example of this is Castle Bravo, the nuclear bombing that I had mentioned previously. The reef was left untouched for 50 years, and scientists did see improvement and rebuilding. But again, it was left untouched for a significant amount of years. So if you're wondering what kind of conservation or preservation programs you can be involved to help the reefs, you can definitely check out organizations like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Organization, the United States Geological Survey. You can, of course, lower your eco footprint. I recommend that for anybody, especially if you're an environmental major. You can check out the Nature, Ecology, and Evolution Journal. That talks not only about reefs, but everything that's going on around the world involving the environment. So you can check up on that weekly. You can obviously join a marine biology career. And I also did send a hyperlink to Dr. Forster that has 4 really cool organizations that are attached to that hyperlink that you guys can go and you can check out. You can see if you can study abroad, or if you can volunteer, or if you can donate, or even you can just share the link, and that helps too. As I wrap up, I just want to talk about this graph quickly that I pulled from the World Resources Institute, and basically this just shows how threatened coral reefs are from now to 2030 to 2050. So as you can see all the way at the right, globally, right now, coral reefs are very highly threatened. By 2030, you see that black line, they're going to be critically threatened, and by 2050, that line just keeps going up. So coral reefs are going to eventually be critically threatened and critically endangered, and, it just proves that something really needs to be done to help these guys, and more than that, something really needs to be done to stop climate change. So I really hope that you all do go ahead and click that hyperlink that will be posted on Blackboard by Dr. Forster, and thank you for listening.